My dad had a tradition on each son's 13th birthday. He would take each of us up on a flight, on an intro flight at the local airstrip. I don't remember much about mine, but I do remember being very scared initially. Once I got used to the conditions and the circumstances, I relaxed and enjoyed the flight a lot. It was very cool being up above the river. It's right near the river, this airstrip. And I got to see the world from above and to be at the controls of the plane. There was only room in it for just the pilot and me. So eventually I got used to it, and I don't know that I'll ever be in a plane like that again. As at one point, at one point I had about 6 different frequent flyer accounts. So this was quite a different experience for me. But every time, it really left a mark on me, because every time I now hear a small Cessna, this is the kind of plane, or a small plane, Piper Cub or whatever, every time I hear one of those flying overhead, I imagine my brother, my 2 brothers, my mother and my father are passengers in the plane, looking down at me, checking out to see whether or not I'm okay. And that's a real wonderful feeling. Perhaps when the world gets well again, I'll take another intro flying lesson. So I often think about my mother in negative terms, how she smoked and drank herself to death pretty much in front of me, and how she was cynical about life, and pretty much nothing was good enough for her. But I have to stop myself frequently to remind myself that she had a pretty rough life. She grew up on a farm outside of Portland, Oregon, in the aftermath of the Depression. Her father died when she was 10, and she must have had a deep desire to be anywhere else when she joined the Air Force and got stationed to an Air Force base in southern Germany in the early 50s. That's about as far away from Oregon as you can get. She raised 4 very active boys and saw the 5th one die in the hospital just days after giving birth. And yet she persisted. 3 of her boys were drug dealers, and yet she persisted. And one of those boys was in a nearly fatal car crash. And I saw her make the decision that to take this boy from the local hospital and transfer him to a more advanced hospital about an hour away. And yet she persisted. And I saw her battle with the loss of her family. Ours lived on the East Coast and hers remained on the West. So she was separated from her family. And yet. And her closest sister, Aunt Pat, battled Alzheimer's, and that must have had an effect on her. And yet. But recently, an old friend of mine called me up out of the blue and had a random memory of her. He thought of her unexpectedly. And he said that she was the den mother in a pack of a Cub Scout pack. And he wondered, how was it that after giving birth to 5 boys, that she agreed to host an entirely different group of almost a dozen boys every Monday for years. Pretty amazing, huh? And so it just amazes me how she decided to do that. And she did it well, because he remembered it years later. So it's time for me to give up whatever judgments I have about her and just remember who she was for me, and who she was for our family. Thanks, Mom. So if my superpowers of cynicism and sarcasm came from my mother, my propensity to anger definitely came from my father. His father came from Germany, and his mother came from Switzerland at the end of the 20th century. They migrated to the States. And my mother's heritage was English and Irish, so I couldn't be any more Western European if I tried. So anyway, my father was the eldest boy in with two older sisters, and he had a younger brother, and his younger brother and he did not get along. So he told me some stories of his growing up years, and one such story stuck with me. So his father, my grandpa Charlie, was a traveling lumber salesman, and he left home on Monday morning and didn't come back until Thursday afternoon. So one night, my father and his mother, my grandmother, went out to a bar after that's for something or other. He wasn't clear on that point. They went out drinking, and at the end of the week, my grandfather came back home and said to my father, pulled him aside and said, "Don't you ever go out drinking with my wife again." So that was the kind of household he grew up in. So my father joined the Air Force and joined my mother in the Air Force base in southern Germany, like I said. So he was an air policeman, my father was. And he was guarding the base one night. This is another story he told me. He was guarding the base one night when the commanding officer, CO, came back drunk. And my father, doing his duty, asked the CO for the password. The CO refused. And my father, always one for doing his duty, asked the CO again. And the CO again refused. So my father didn't back down, and neither did the CO. So at some point, my dad told me that another officer was called in to broker the standoff, and the CO was eventually allowed onto the base. So I don't think my father was written up for that, but and that's fine because he was just doing his duty. So our family was one that prized responsibility and discipline above all else. So sometimes when our family was gathered around the dinner table, we would be discussing the issues of the day in the late 60s and early 70s. Sometimes things would get a little heated. And when my father had his share, he would take a moment and slam his hand down on the table. Enough! And that would be that. But my father did teach me how to play golf. And on the fairways, when we walked around, I saw a different side of him. One that was fun-loving and had a great sense of humor. He also taught me how to play pool. And one word that he used to help me play better on both the pool table and the golf course was finesse. And on both of those fronts, my dad had that in spades. Thank you, Dad. I think you've heard enough of me talking for the time being, so now I'm going to sing you a song. I'd like to dedicate this to Paulie Vegas, wherever he is. Television, it's a media hype. Television, you know all the types. Detectives, electives, and other deviates. Inspectives, rejectives, it's all previous. Spaced out little zombies sitting in front of the screen, slowly getting brainwashed, 'cause they really don't know the scene. Television, it's a media hype. Television, you know all the types. Scamcasters, spin masters, and other bogus slime. Fact blasters, bad actors, you're wasting my time. Reality show wannabe leaders, thinking that you're gonna be cool. You march this country backwards, we see you're just one more fool. So is there any hope? I'm turning into a derp. How steep is this slope? I'm getting tired of this trope. Television, we're all eating the hype. Num, num, num. Television, take another swipe. Hard left. Television. 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 So when I was about 13 or 14, my dad and I went to the Third Run movie theater in town, and we saw Blazing Saddles. Funniest movie ever. Not at all politically correct. Gross in parts, sexist in parts, anti-racist in many parts, but always funny. So anyway, we're sitting in the theater, and a little while into the show, the usher comes down. Yeah, an usher. That's how old I am, and says, "Call for William Ralph. Call for William Ralph." So he and I look at each other, and we wonder what's up. So he gets up to go to the phone. In a few minutes, he comes back. A few minutes later, he comes back, and I ask, "What's up?" And so he says, "Your mother called from the 11 Main." That's one of their favorite bars, and she found that she locked her keys. She was going to buy cigarettes there at the 11 Main, and she found that she locked the keys in the car, the motor running. And so I said, "Are we going to go get her?" And he says, "Hell no, we're going to watch this movie." And we sat there watching this movie, and we laughed even harder knowing that she was there. And I said, and he also explained that, oh, she's safe, and if the car runs out of fuel, it'll just shut off. So we were just having a blast. This made it even funnier. So eventually we made it to the 11 Main, and I thought that she was going to be pissed. There she was, sitting at the bar, enjoying a scotch and water and a lit Parliament in front of her. Enjoying herself thoroughly. And that is why they were married for 38 years. I could see the worry in the waitress's eyes. She's seen me come to this bar restaurant every week for years. And why couldn't my parents see that? She was the mother of one of my high school friends, and her daughter was out doing things that kids of our age should have been doing, is hanging out with their friends. So I just got a glass of water here. So here I am, sitting in this bar restaurant with my parents again, and I really do not want to be here. So that's they're taking me out to dinner, and I know, because it's happened before, that they're going to have too much to drink, and I'm going to be in the company of other adults getting drunk. So also in this bar was a man who I could tell was trying to seduce me. And my father had great respect for his intellect, but he was a lovely, non-judgmental man, and his lovely, non-judgmental way didn't see or didn't take into account that this man was gay, and I was in his sights. So I couldn't be around this man because I knew it wasn't safe. So the only thing that saved my sanity when I was in this place was the jukebox, because I was feeling creeped out, abandoned, and joyous because the jukebox was great. That was the only thing that saved me, and it just saved me from walking in front of the train that was rolling by consistently a few hundred feet away. Was that jukebox. And on this box, frequently playing were a few songs that I really liked. Jazz Man from Carole King, Rise from Herb Alpert, and George on Broadway from George Benson. You get the idea. So I got no idea. They were smoking and drinking in this place, and I had no clue what I could do other than just occasionally walk outside, because this was way before the indoor smoking laws were a thing. And I also had absolutely no idea that I could just walk home because it was in my neighborhood. The thought never occurred to me. And of course, I couldn't leave my parents, not me, the caretaker. So I just took it in and stayed with it. I didn't say anything. So there are some self-help traditions that say that there are no victims, only volunteers. So I don't know what I was volunteering for. I'm still trying to work that one out. Nigel Tufnell said that D minor is the saddest of all keys. I think that A minor is a close second. There's a part of me wants to be miserable. I can do everything on my own. There's a part of me wants to be righteous with judgments and arrogant lies, with the feeling of a stone. Each of these parts is a part of me, like my muscles and sinews and bones. All of my greatness is there as well, and I'm willing to make it my own. Ain't it funny how I go to that torture cell, and I don't belong there after all. But it's just another part of that man I see in the mirror each day. Now I'm gonna stand tall. Each of these parts is a part of me, like my muscles and sinews and bones. All of my greatness is there as well, and I'm willing to make it my own. It's hard to write about that greatness within me. That's a part that doesn't get the attention. That's the part that does the quiet service, and that hardly gets my mention. Each of these parts is a part of me, like my muscles and sinews and bones. All of my greatness is there as well, and I'm willing to make it my own.